Welcome to the Emergency Planning and Demonstration Program Performance Measures Training. Today we're going to talk about understanding your program data, how to prepare, how to collect, how to track, and how to report on program data. Understanding and reporting useful and accurate data is a critical component in the solicitation and award process and can help both yourself and your program manager gain key insights on many decision-making factors, whether those factors be time, resources, or funding. OJJDP uses performance data to not only understand the agency story, but also to demonstrate outcome-based results. In this training session, we will go over the revised performance measures, and we will discuss collecting and sharing information to help all of us better understand how well the emergency planning and demonstration program is operating on the ground. The agenda for today includes the following program overview: performance measures, collecting and tracking data and best practices, reporting data and best practices, as well as reporting in a pandemic and what to do with personally identifiable information will be presented. Lastly, we will review key documents and resources. As we progress through the training, all website links mentioned during the training will be presented to you in chat and also provided to you in your copy of the presentation to be emailed to you later this week. The objectives for today include understanding what the performance measure updates are for your program and understanding the need for a data collection plan for the data you collect between July 2021 and December 2021, reporting in January of 2022. Further, you will gain understanding of the performance measure reporting due dates. Those due dates, as you know, occur twice a year, July 30th and January 30th. And lastly, you will understand where to go to find supporting resources. Now, in the showcase sessions we conducted last April, we talked about the newly updated performance measures as outlined in your solicitation or award and located at the OJJDP.ojp.gov website. This training is being presented to you to emphasize the fact that now is the time to start planning on collecting and tracking data for the July through December 2021 reporting cycle, with the goal of reporting in January 2022 on these newly revised program measures. I'd like to pass the microphone to Sarah, who will take us through the performance measures. Sarah?
Thank you, Rebecca. In the State Relations and Assistance Division, we have several programs. The program that we're talking about today is the Emergency Planning and Demonstration Program. Now, a little background information. Under this solicitation, OJJDP allocates funding and resources for juvenile justice facilities to respond and recover from natural, technological, or man-made emergencies. The funds are used to cover costs of equipment, implementing emergency preparedness programs, and training staff on emergency preparedness guidelines. The current program managers are Brittany Ford, Ashley Washington, and Kara Blair, and the program supervisor is Tinane Bradford. This slide captures the results, outcomes, and goals of the OJJDP PM team that the PM team created alongside OJJDP staff. This ensured the revised measures increased alignment with OJJDP's overall mission, provided federal staff actionable data, and increases the collection of outcome-based data. OJJDP's desired result for the Juvenile Justice Emergency Planning Demonstration Program is to ensure juvenile justice systems and residential facilities are prepared to respond to natural, technological, and man-made disasters to preserve the safety and well-being of staff, youth, and families. To achieve this result, OJJDP established 3 goals. Children, youth, families, and staff in the justice system are safe during emergencies by providing resources to states, counties, and local juvenile justice residential facilities to develop and implement emergency preparedness plans, provide resources to juvenile justice residential facilities, and the second goal is juvenile justice residential facilities have the appropriate resources to respond to national, technological, and man-made disasters. Now let's remind ourselves of the performance measures process and then discuss the newly updated performance measures found in the Juvenile Justice Emergency Planning and Demonstration Programs for Juvenile Justice Emergency Planning. As you review these with me, please note that these are newly revised performance measures, but you may recognize some of them since not all of them were changed. The framework or logic model used to write the performance measures includes 4 components: inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. Inputs are program resources such as grant funding and award administration. Activities are actions that convert inputs to outputs and can be anything from identifying key personnel with access to crime and alcohol abuse data to establishing information sharing agreements. Outputs are products or services that are the result of activities such as trainings and meetings. Outcome measures speak to the longer-term program goals. The newly updated performance measures will require changes in the way you collect data, and that's why we're here today, to ensure you understand that you will be reporting on the newly updated performance measures during the July through December 2021 period come January 30th of 2022, and that you have a plan in place to do so. The performance measures document the progress you have made in accomplishing program goals and objectives by collecting data on grantee activities and services. Remember, regular reporting on performance measures outcomes establishes your program's growth. You can find a list of your program's performance measures at this online location listed on the slide. Performance measure type was broken down into output measures and outcome measures. Output measures are product-based. Output is a countable product or service that your program provides or produces. The volume of work your program accomplishes, such as number of youth served, number of trainings conducted, and outcome measures are measures-based. Outcomes, it shows a change in knowledge, attitude, skill, and or behavior that occurs within an individual, family, agency, system, or community. These can be short or long-term. The performance measure categories were also broken down into overall measures, multi-program measures, and program-specific measures. In overall measures, grantees will be asked the same overall questions in every program. This allows analysts to aggregate data across multiple programs and assist with responding to ad hoc data requests. Multi-program measures impact 3 different types of populations. First are shared targeted populations, such as children involved in the child welfare system or tribal youth. Second are those with a similar service delivery model, such as mental health services or prevention services. And lastly, those with shared outcomes, such as youth provided with defense counsel. Program-specific measures collect data that align with a specific population, funded activity, or desired result. These measures help reflect the unique outputs and outcomes for each specific program and distinguishes them from other programs. Program-specific measures also help track the progress of individual programs over time. The Juvenile Justice Emergency Planning Demonstration Program has 4 overall measures. It has 1 multi-program measure and 5 program-specific measures. I'll be highlighting these measures on the next slides. To begin, we will start with reviewing a few overall measures. For a percentage of training participants who reported they applied training, knowledge, or skills within 3 months of attending a training, you will simply provide the number of participants that used the skills or knowledge learned at a training within 3 months of attending the training. For a percentage of organizations who employed a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice recommended by a technical assistance provider, you will provide the number of organizations that received technical assistance. Then you will provide the number of organizations that employed a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice. And then lastly, the number of organizations that employed a new service, policy, or practice after receiving technical assistance. Percentage of partnerships maintained is an example of a multi-program measure. OJJDP promotes the collaboration amongst organizations and establishment of partnerships. To account for this data, we created a new program output measure, percentage of partnerships maintained. For this measure, you will provide the number of new partnerships established, the number of partnerships maintained, and the type of partnership, which you will provide in a text box. Quantity of equipment purchased is the first example of a program-specific measure. We define emergency equipment as resources or supplies used to help respond to and preserve the well-being of individuals during an emergency. For this measure, you will simply enter the quantity of emergency equipment purchased. The number of emergency planning for juvenile justice guidelines facilities distributed is a unique measure written specifically for emergency planning. Emergency planning for juvenile justice residential facilities guidelines refers to the standard procedures developed to address the specific needs of individuals living in a residential facility involved in the juvenile justice system during an emergency. For this measure, you will provide the number of emergency planning for juvenile justice residential facilities guidelines distributed. The number of existing policies employed to address emergency preparedness gaps for juvenile justice guidelines distributed is also a unique measure written specifically for this program. Existing policies employed refers to procedures, policies, or practices implemented by a residential facility for a minimum of 12 months prior to the activity period. For this measure, you will provide the number of existing emergency preparedness policies employed. Number of new policies employed to address emergency preparedness gaps. We define new policies as procedures implemented within 0 to 6 months. Emergency preparedness refers to juvenile justice facilities' readiness to respond, mitigate, or prevent unforeseen man-made, natural, or technological disasters. For this measure, you will provide the number of new policies employed to address emergency preparedness gaps, number of new policies employed that adhered to the emergency planning for juvenile justice residential facility guidelines, and lastly, the number of new policies employed that adapted the emergency planning for juvenile justice residential facilities guidelines. Now for our last program-specific measure, we have percentage of individuals with increased knowledge of facility emergency preparedness. For this measure, you will provide the number of individuals that use the skills or knowledge learned at a training within 3 months and the number of individuals trained. And now I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Sarah. We have a short scenario for you. We have Brenda Sukup. She is an emergency planning and demonstration awardee, and she has just received the newly updated performance measures. She's attended this learning event, and she's sitting at her desk wondering how to get started. What would you recommend Ms. Sukup do to prepare for data collection in the July through December 2021 period, reporting in January of 2022? If you'd enter your response in chat, many colleagues have mentioned things like making sure that she's familiar with all of the measures, definitions, and questions, determining who is responsible for capturing and tracking the data, determining who is responsible for reporting the data in Just Grants. Now, these are all the things that Brenda can do. Some of the things that Brenda needs to know and prepare herself for is lies in understanding the reporting process. FY19 and prior grantees will continue to complete reports in the PMT and submit them in Just Grants during the July submission period. FY20 grantees continue to report on and submit narrative questions in Just Grants during the July submission period. FY20 grantees and FY19 and prior grantees whose awards have not yet ended report on the newly revised performance measures beginning January of 2022. Okay, moving on from Brenda and the scenario, we're going to take a look at best practices when collecting and tracking data. Creating a data collection plan requires a good deal of pre-planning and preparation. When creating a data collection plan, best practices often include locating the performance measures, understanding what each question is asking, and determining how that answer will be responded to in data form, even if that answer ends up being a 0, and creating a plan to identify when and how you will collect that data. For example, what type of tool or instrument will you use to collect? Has the tool or instrument been validated and or used before? How accurate is this tool or instrument? And who will collect the data using the tool or instrument? There are several best practices that you can implement when collecting data for the upcoming reporting cycle. Actually, this reporting cycle we're in now. You want to be proactive in your approach. You want to designate staff for the coordination of the performance measure data collection process. You want to review the progress reporting questionnaire. You want to ensure that designated staff participate in trainings. You want to pay attention to communication from Just Grants. And lastly, if applicable, you want to review, edit, and validate data with subgrantees before submission. Is there a grantee and subgrantee relationship? You are required to enter data on all performance measures that relate to activities described in your approved OJJDP grant application and carried out with OJJDP funding. As a grantee, you should plan to collect data on behalf of all of your subgrantees. Some things to think about as you plan to collect and track data include timelines and resources. After all, this can be a lengthy data collection period, as noted in your solicitation. Some of the questions that you may want to consider while planning include duration of data collection and document version control. Does your plan include a beginning, a middle, and an ending date? How will you manage documents over that time period? For example, will you track them using an Excel spreadsheet? Regarding location and access, how long will you store the data? Who will have access to it? And if it is stored on a shared drive, who is given permissions and by whom? Lastly, how will changes be communicated? How will the data be validated and edited if applicable? Next, let's review several best practices during reporting. In the January 2022 reporting cycle, you will be reporting on the newly revised performance measures and crafting narratives. The narrative questions provide you with the opportunity to answer or address these topics. What do the numbers you reported on in your performance measures actually mean on the ground? How does your work impact your community? You want to use the narrative to walk the reader from the numeric output to the tangible outcome. You want to use specific and detailed concrete examples to illustrate your points whenever you can. And other things to think about including in your narrative could be providing evidence to support conclusions, thinking about what funding has allowed you to do that you could not do prior to receiving the funding, and it could include words like COVID-19 and pandemic when explaining COVID-19 adjustments to the program. Let's discuss best practices for reporting in Just Grants. Common issues arise since you're required to respond to every question. When reporting zeros, if a measure does not apply, you can enter a 0 value and then add an explanation by selecting the comments field. A brief description, such as we are still in our planning period, or there was no activity during the reporting cycle, are acceptable responses in Just Grants. Avoiding duplication and count can also be very challenging. Having more than one person review the data for example, a program manager at a site visit, can help ensure duplicate data does not exist in your reporting. And, as you know, reporting is awards-based. Another best practice for those of you with multiple awards when trying not to duplicate your data is to spend down funds and create a final report of activities you performed for the oldest award first before beginning to enter data and reporting on other awards. If this is not possible, prorate your quantitative data according to the amount of each award, again, for those of you with multiple awards. You want to contact Just Grants with any concerns related to error messages found in Just Grants. You can save your data and you can resume data entry at a later point in time in Just Grants. For more information such as this, please visit the YouTube video using the link provided on the screen and posted in chat. Also, you may want to contact the PMT Help Desk for any questions related to progress reporting or reporting on the newly updated performance measures. You are encouraged to reach out to your program manager with questions or concerns. Now, as mentioned previously, some grantees may receive funding from other awards. A service should be reported under one program or the other. The same service cannot be reported under multiple programs. If you have difficulty tracking services for each specific award, work with OJJDP program managers to identify an appropriate method for prorating all services to allocate numbers to each award. You'll be reporting on the activities that occurred between July and December of 2021 in January of 2022. Discretionary awards reporting deadlines are July 30th for the reporting period January 1st through June 30th, and January 30th for the reporting period July 1st through December 31st. More information regarding reporting and Just Grants will be forthcoming. Reporting on the new measures. If you are a 2019 and earlier grantee, this training is not directed at you, but you are welcome to stay to learn more about the new measures. Regarding the 2020 and future grantees, even though Just Grants does not yet have the functionality to accept data for the new measures, these trainings are being conducted to ensure that you begin tracking data in support of the new measures. Doing so ensures that you can report your program data once the system functionality is available. Lastly, no modifications are being made to the existing measures in the PMT system, as it will be sunsetting eventually. Collecting and tracking data that contains personally identifiable information, also known as PII, should be done with consideration towards the Privacy Act of 1974. Broadly stated, the purpose of the Privacy Act is to balance the government's need to maintain information about the individual with the right of the individual to be protected against unwarranted invasion of their privacy. In accordance with this act, you want to collect only the data you need. If you are using printed materials, keep sensitive PII in locked desk drawers, file cabinets, or similar locked enclosures. And when using sensitive PII, you want to keep it in an area where access is controlled and limited to persons with an official need to know. Reporting in a pandemic. You should complete progress reporting to the best of your ability and submit it before the deadline. Every progress report form includes a narrative field or multiple narrative fields where you can provide additional information about the data. Use this space to explain any incomplete or missing data. You're encouraged to use the narrative field that asks for additional information about effectiveness to describe COVID-19 related adjustments to programming and other activities not captured elsewhere on the form. If you cannot provide accurate count for numerical progress report fields, because project partners do not have access to files, for example, you should leave those fields blank rather than providing estimates. As a best practice, you want to communicate setback and success through the use of progress reports, as well as with your program specialist. So, how do you report on activities now that they've been shifted to online remote platforms and when you've not been collecting detailed data on individuals served like you did in face-to-face sessions? The short answer here is to do the best you can and make very good use of those narrative fields. Next, I'd like to pass the microphone to Muniba, who will discuss the various resources at your disposal and where to go for assistance. Muniba?
Thank you, Rebecca. Now we will briefly go over resources and where grant award administrators can find additional assistance. The PMC Help Desk is available to help you with any questions you may have about responding to the progress reporting questions or performance measures. You can contact us by calling the number on the screen or emailing OJJDP pmt@ojp.usdoj.gov. For a faster response, we encourage grant award administrators to send the Help Desk an email. The OJJDP PMC Help Desk contact information is available on the screen. Our office hours are Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, except for U.S. federal holidays. The PMC Help Desk returns emails and phone calls within 24 hours, so please don't hesitate to leave a voicemail or email even after business hours. If you have questions about the Just Grant system, for example, accessing the system, please call the number on the screen between the hours of 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and Saturday, Sunday, and federal holidays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you experience any issues with Just Grants, we encourage grant award administrators to reach out to Just Grant support. Just Grants information, such as instructions on locating, completing, and submitting performance reports in Just Grants, can be found on the OJJDP.ojp.gov website or by viewing the video available on the screen. You can also log into Just Grants at justicgrants.usdoj.gov. Thanks. Now back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Muniba. Let's take a moment here and reflect on what was presented today. First, we discussed each of the program-specific emergency planning and demonstration program performance measures, noting the specific instances where data would need to be collected and the type of data needed. Next, we learned about best practices for planning, collecting, tracking, and reporting on data for the July through December 2021 reporting cycle. An important takeaway is the fact that OJJDP understands that data collection has begun and organizations, agencies, and subawards need time to review, process, and create a data collection plan for these performance measures. Some indicators will be easier to collect than others. We encourage you to work with your partners and TTA providers on a data collection plan. So, what is next? Next steps include the opportunity we all have to collect data that will inform change down the road. For our part, those changes come in the form of edited performance measures. You'll be receiving a fillable feedback form that you are requested to complete and return to the PMT Help Desk once you have familiarized yourself with the newly updated performance measures. There is one form per performance measure with plenty of room for narrative. Providing us with the feedback on the newly revised performance measures gives us the information we need to fully understand your needs or those challenges that you may face implementing that particular measure. Thus, collecting your feedback now on the newly revised performance measures informs the refresh cycle after the pilot has occurred and we have identified changes or updates. For now, however, no planned changes to the performance measures are being considered, and we would request that you do not make any changes to any of the documents posted online or provided in training sessions. And that concludes today's session.